Argentina has everything that you'd want in a country. Yet, for the last 80 years, it's been a basket case. Argentina has defaulted on its debt 9 times. They average hyperinflation every 11 years or so. Double-digit inflation has been chronic, leading to multiple large currency devaluations. These crises reflect its history of misguided leadership, political corruption, and squandered opportunity. Argentina has some of the most bountiful farmland on the planet. It is entirely energy independent with ample wind, solar, oil, and natural gas resources. Geographically, it's situated far from any major military powers, and Argentina's neighbors are small and/or dysfunctional. So, why will things change in the decades ahead? Well, generations of short-sighted, crony economic policy might just be coming to an end. In December of 2023, Argentina elected Javier Milei as its new president. The career economist has a plan to get the Argentine economy back on track that is just as audacious as his hairstyle.
Yo no vine acá a guiar corderos, vine a despertar leones y están despertando, están despertando.
At the beginning of 2024, poverty levels in Argentina reached a 20-year high of 57%. There is a lot of work to do, but this is also one of the most exciting, high-potential adventures in modern economic history. In this video, we'll cover how Argentina got into this mess, Milei's plan to get his country out of it, and the enormous bounty that could be waiting for them in the years ahead. Argentina was one of the world's wealthiest nations in the 1910s. Wealthier than France, on par with the United States and the United Kingdom. During this period, Argentina's economy was booming due to its agricultural exports, which benefited from the global demand for beef and grain. The country's GDP per capita was one of the highest in the world, thanks to loans from the late British Empire. But at the onset of World War I, Britain needed to be repaid. This demand came at a time when global conflict disrupted trade and reduced Argentina's export revenues. Argentina faced a liquidity crisis, with decreased revenues and no new funds to refinance its debts. This financial strain made it impossible for Argentina to meet its debt obligations, leading to a default. After the war, Argentina redeveloped itself into a leading power in wheat, corn, pork, beef, and oil with borrowed funds. But then the Great Depression hit, and the country again stumbled into crisis. The next 3 decades were marked by military coups and an incredibly damaging economic model called Peronism, after Colonel Juan Domingo Perón rose to power. Perón's haphazard model of government blended the worst of socialism and fascism, with railroads, airlines, foreign trade, and other industries being nationalized and then mismanaged. Peronism would become a pillar of Argentine politics for the next half-century, as would chronic inflation and debt crises. Argentina defaulted on its debt in 1982 and experienced a deep recession. In the late 80s, fiscal deficits financed by money printing led to hyperinflation. In 2001, financial mismanagement again led to mass unemployment, widespread social unrest, a banking crisis, and what was, at the time, the largest sovereign debt default in history. But Argentine leaders failed to learn their lesson. In the 2010s, high government spending, price controls, and restrictions on access to foreign currency again triggered high inflation that could only be handled through strict currency controls. In 2018, the government sought assistance from the International Monetary Fund, entering a $57 billion loan agreement, the largest in the IMF's history. By 2023, Argentinians had had enough and looked to a new leader to change the country's course. They found one in the form of a fiery economist with a distinctly different vision for the future. Upon his election, Javier Milei wasted no time implementing major changes. His executive team issued a deregulation decree in the face of 20% month-over-month inflation. Past leaders would propose short-term solutions, But Milei preferred to address the root cause. His deregulation decree was an executive order that must be rejected by both legislative chambers in order to be overturned. This is a common tool of Argentine presidents, and Milei is far from its most aggressive user. His deregulation decree had numerous substantial changes aimed at enabling market economies and reducing currency controls. Rent contracts can now be completed in any foreign currency, and judges are prohibited from converting the price into pesos. Debts need to be settled in that same currency. It also removed rent controls, which will finally allow the market to find a natural clearing price. Milei also ended export controls, export quotas, and the regulation of consumer prices to free up businesses to trade. His open skies policy opened Argentina up to airline companies from all over the world. Previous governments had protected the country's national airlines, which led to enormous bloat and inefficiency. The decree also ended price caps on healthcare plans and made generic medicine like aspirin able to be sold outside of pharmacies. This is a standard in many other countries, but all the pharmacies immediately cried doom and gloom. Imagine grocery stores that couldn't sell you Tylenol without a license. All of these strategies allow for businesses to compete openly, which means Argentinians will eventually get the best products and services instead of just protecting old entrenched interests. Milei has a 4-year term, so we should expect these to hold for the next few years. Some of his bolder plans require legislative approval.
No hay plan B.
Before we go any further, it's important to explain the enormous potential waiting to be tapped in Argentina. Its geography might be the globe's second best after the United States. Argentina has the 4th largest chunk of arable, temperate zone agricultural land, and it's overlaid by one of the world's largest estuaries in the world. It's not the Mississippi River Basin, but it's close. All that arable land, without need for irrigation, can feed Argentina's population with excess to spare. Food insecure countries will happily pay for that excess, as 20% of Chinese imported agricultural products come from Brazil. Argentina also has a geography that enables world-class security. Being at the southern end of South America positions the country far from the world's major powers. It's 7,000 miles to Miami or London. Even Africa is 5,000 miles away. And the Panama Canal diverts most global shipping from passing by Argentine waters. You could not come up with a longer supply line for a foreign adversary. On its western boundary is the Andes mountain range, which serves as an additional security buffer. So it's secure, it can feed itself. What about energy? Well, it's already the world's 3rd largest shale producer. Back in the mid-20th century, it was a significant exporter of both oil and gas. Additionally, once it builds the infrastructure, it could be a top 10 producer of solar and wind power. Can you believe that this lottery ticket has been squandered for the last century? It kind of proves that geography doesn't guarantee a country's outcomes. Well, let's get back to Argentina's salvation. When an economy has been so mismanaged for generations, the avenues to buy votes, enrich politicians, and steal from common people becomes institutionalized. Government is not a speedboat that can be easily turned around. It's a cruise ship with little maneuverability. So Milei's proposal is to disassemble the cruise ship, which has become brutally expensive to maintain.
Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera. Aunque te resistas.
In Milei's vision, that means eliminating 11 out of 19 government ministries. In Argentina, 55% of all registered workers are government employees. Some provinces are as high as 70%. This is notably high when comparing to both regional and global averages. Public sector employment in Latin America averages just 12%. Public sector employment in the US is also just 12%. So where should people work if these ministries are shut down? Well, for starters, many of the nationalized industries will be privatized. Recently, the transfer of public assets to the private sector has become a global trend. The Indian government has embarked on a significant privatization drive, including the sale of Air India to Tata Sons in 2021. Following the financial crisis, Greece has privatized a number of state-owned assets as a part of its bailout agreements with the European Union and the International Monetary Fund. This includes the privatization of ports, airports, and the state lottery. The sale of Port of Piraeus to China's COSCO Shipping Corporation is a prominent example. As part of Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia has initiated plans to privatize some sectors previously controlled by the state, including utilities and airports. The most ambitious plan includes the partial IPO of Aramco, the state-owned oil company, which was partially executed in 2019, becoming the world's largest initial public offering. But in order to pull all of this off, Milei will need legislative approval. And since many public officials use these nationalized industries to curry favor, they will fight this tooth and nail. One deputy decided to bury himself alive in protest, but like a good government bureaucrat, he never finished the job. And this will help clean up the country's balance sheet, attracting investors for Argentina's flagship airline, its biggest energy company, and other key sectors should help pay off debt and improve the operation of these essential services. While Milei waits for this to pass through the legislature, he's cut discretionary funding to provinces by 98%.
Nosotros hemos echado 50.000 empleados públicos, hay 10.000 contratos que vencían y que no los renovamos, eliminamos 200.000 programas sociales dados de manera irregular, bajamos 98% las transferencias discrecionales a las provincias y al mismo tiempo también otra de las cosas que hicimos fue eliminar la obra pública, que es una fuente de corrupción gigante.
Additionally, Milei is meeting with the IMF to borrow another $15 billion so that exchange rates can be unified and he can accelerate dollarization. What does this mean? Well, past government administrations in Argentina have set an official rate of converting Argentinian pesos to US dollars. But there's some funny business there, and the existence of a blue dollar market is effectively a black market for dollars, where the real difference in value between the Argentinian peso and the US dollar is discovered through market forces. The existence of a 30% spread between these rates indicates a lack of confidence in the official currency exchange rate and its economic policies. By advocating for the unification of exchange rates, Milei is pushing for the elimination of this discrepancy, aiming for a single, market-accepted exchange rate. This will bring dollarization to Argentina more swiftly. Imagine how difficult it would be to run a small business in an environment where the same currency fluctuates between multiple valuations depending on where you exchange it. You can see why under previous administrations, entrepreneurship and small business suffered. Milei's plan is to not impose dollarization by law, but to simply make it possible through the free market. Businesses that trade internationally will be able to price their goods and services in US dollars across the board. And there are several instances from the last 2 decades where dollarization has been successful. Ecuador and El Salvador adopted the US dollar in the early 2000s to combat hyperinflation, stabilize their economies, and attract foreign investment. After experiencing hyperinflation in the Great Financial Crisis, Zimbabwe adopted a multi-currency system which included the US dollar. This, together with other spending cuts, has already begun to unwind the hyperinflationary debt bomb that previous Argentinian presidents had hung around the neck of their country. January saw the Argentine government's first surplus in more than 12 years. Privatization and dollarization also help to root out corruption. Milei claims that
Argentine politicians, by means of seigniorage, steal 5 points of the GDP from the Argentine people. Probably that's the greatest resistance of those thieves who want to keep stealing from the good Argentines.
Dollarization would also place Argentina in a position to be more aligned with a Western US-led trading bloc in the decade ahead, and distance itself from China, Argentina's second largest trade partner. If Argentina's economy starts humming, all bets are off. It has the natural resources and security environment to maintain its assets in a world that feels increasingly like it's falling apart. It will win the 2030s if it can shake off Peronism, become an energy exporter, and play a role in providing agricultural goods to an increasingly hungry world. But what if that's not all they do? The Falkland Islands sit off of Argentina's eastern coastline and has been a British overseas territory since 1833. The Falkland Islands have been a subject of dispute between the UK and Argentina for many years, with Argentina claiming sovereignty over the islands, which they call the Malvinas. While Argentina is on the rise, the United Kingdom seems to be headed in the opposite direction. In the next decade, there may be an opening for leadership in Buenos Aires to take it back. 2033 would be the 200-year anniversary. We have a video coming soon on why the future of the United Kingdom isn't so bright. Like and subscribe so you don't miss it.